welcome to everyone who's here for our mystery panel. We've got a great group here, and we're going to kick it off pretty quickly because there's 5 people to talk in only 45 minutes, and I want to do audience questions and online questions. And with such a small group, you'll probably get a chance to ask your question. So first, I just want everyone to introduce themselves in just a sentence or two. What do you write? And especially focusing on your mysteries, because multiple people here write in 3 or 4 or 5 different genres too, and have over their career. I'll just start quickly. I'm Adam. I write mysteries under D.D. Black. I know some of you came to my talk yesterday. But let's go down to the end and start with Jonathan.
I'm Jonathan Maberry, multiple genre author and comic book writer. I write mysteries in a lot. It's really hard to encapsulate this. Almost everything I write, no matter what genre I write, has mystery in it. So my Joe Ledger military thrillers have mystery in it. My horror stuff has mystery in it. I'm actually just now marketing my agent is shopping my first straight mystery series that has no vampires, no special ops, no alien invaders, and it will be just mystery. So it'll be fun to do.
Hi folks, I am Diane Capri. I write mystery, thriller, suspense. If you heard my talk yesterday on the thriller side, what I said was I think every book should be a mystery and every book should have suspense. But in the mystery genre, we write, there's a variety of those. I write mostly, years ago when I first started, what was called cozy mystery, but these days they call it traditional mystery. And that's what I'm here to talk about today.
Hi, my pen name is Colette Clark. My real name's Adrienne Cobb. I write historical mysteries. Right now I have a 1920s series and a 1930s series, and I'm going to expand on that, maybe to the Victorian and all the way up to the 1960s. I don't know if that counts, but historical mystery is my genre.
My name is Cheryl Bradshaw, and I've been writing since about publishing 2011, and I write mostly mainstream mystery, but I also write paranormal suspense, supernatural suspense, and women's fiction, and a couple other things.
So I want to do a quick show of hand. Who here is currently working on trying to finish their first book, the newer authors? Okay, a handful. Who here has 1 to 5 books out already? Who has more than 5 books out already? Okay, so quite a few people have more than 5, a few newer authors, so you can just take that into consideration when you give your answers. We're going to start off with some craft stuff, and then at the second half, we're going to go to marketing stuff with some quick hitting questions about what's working in terms of marketing these days for the people on the panel. But I want to start off with, what do you wish you'd focused on more regarding craft as you finished your early book? So if you can think back to your first, say, 5 books, what didn't you know then that you know now about craft that you wish you'd known in terms of just what to focus on? Story, character, making more beautiful sentences, focusing on setting, that sort of thing. How about we just go like this? Whoever has a brilliant thing to say, just start talking.
I'm not sure it's brilliant, but
somewhat brilliant is fine.
One of the things I wish I could go back and tell my earlier self was to trust the reader more. I was writing a complex supernatural thriller, had mystery elements to it, and what I didn't really trust that the reader would remember all the details. So I kind of a couple times would go in there and just reintroduce a character that was only introduced 100 pages ago, and a few things like that, because it took me years to write it and then days to read it, but that part didn't click in my first book. So now I trust the reader to remember, and also trust that the reader is somewhat of a dedicated reader who has experience in the genre and knows basically how a mystery is structured. That level of trust is something I learned as the first book came out, and I started talking to readers and so on, and getting that kind of feedback, and I wish I could go back and have that conversation with my younger self.
Does anyone else have a comment on that?
So my first series has the most books still of like anything I've ever written, and I would say, I've actually gone back to the very first book, since that's where everybody usually starts, to then move on to everything else. And I would say that I have revised that book 1 because it is the first one everybody goes back and read. But I wish that I obviously cannot change the storyline, even going back and like tightening it up after all these years. But I wish that I would have understood how important like a first chapter is in terms of like who do you murder in that first chapter, I would have totally changed how that went down and thought about it kind of what Jonathan's saying, like in more of a sense of like what I think would have pulled the reader in having never read me before. Because now when I start new series, I know exactly what I need to do that's a lot better than and more punchy and more powerful. And at the beginning, I just wasn't sure.
Great answers. I definitely second what Jonathan said too. My wife's my first reader, and she's always accusing me of over-explaining and not trusting the reader enough. And I do way more now, but if I go back to look at my old books, it's just too much explanation. I could have cut 20,000 words of reiterating stuff I'd already said, and it's embarrassing. And the books are shorter and faster now. Yeah, boring, that's what my wife says. Diane?
On the same lines of trusting the reader, readers for mysteries have different expectations. And my expectation as a reader was I want to be surprised at the end. I don't want to be able to know who the killer was. And so I started out trying to write those kinds of surprise endings. I still do that because that's still what I prefer. If I know where who's the bad guy, who done it in a mystery, then I'm generally not going to read the book. It just isn't interesting to me. I want to have that moving forward. What I learned over time is that not every reader is like that. Some mystery readers, believe it or not, don't like suspense. It makes them nervous, and they feel anxious about it. So they kind of are the ones who want to sort of follow along and figure it out with the detective as the detective is figuring it out. So I would say trying to write a surprise ending is very difficult. Because if you're trying to write a fair play mystery so that the reader can figure it out, ultimately, if they go back from the end, they're like, oh, I didn't see that coming, but I should have because, that shoe dropped in the first chapter and I should have known that. A lot of people, prefer to be able to look for the clues. And so mystery readers are very persnickety about details. And one of the things I didn't really understand that well is how specific I had to be. One example I gave the other day was I said a U.S. Marshal showed up wearing his uniform. Well, we all know U.S. Marshals wear suits, right? They don't actually wear uniforms, but that's what I meant. The U.S. Marshal's uniform is his suit, right? I got readers writing to me, complaining that I had said that because they don't wear uniforms, but I didn't mean it literally. So now I've learned that in a mystery, you have to be very, very careful about your word choices and how you describe things because everything could be a clue, right?
Did you have a comment on that?
Well, just to piggyback off that, I was watching Anthony Horowitz, talk about his method, and he said, you want the reader to end saying, I didn't figure it out, but I should have. I say could have, and I love surprise endings. I do it all my books, and I'm a pantser, and if I had to start over, I would just trust that I'm a pantser and not try to be Potter, because I thought for mystery you have to. I don't know who the killer is going to be when I start. And if I do, 9 times out of 10, I change it at the last minute. And that's, I go back and I leave really subtle clues. And that's one thing my readers have said is that I should have picked that up. It was such a subtle clue. And, but they aren't angry that they couldn't have figured it out. And that's really important to me in terms of my mysteries.
Keep the microphone close. I'm hoping you'll answer this next one too. I want to talk about setting for a minute. I had a lot more success with my new pen name when I really focused on one setting. And I think all of us might have favorite crime series or mystery series that focus heavily on a setting. Colette, I know you're doing that in New York City. Time period and location. For me, it was specifically location because mine are set in modern day Pacific Northwest around the Seattle area. But so I wonder who would like to say something about how you think about setting. Is it important in your work? And how do you give the reader the setting and make it real without, a 10-page description of all the details that you might lose the momentum on?
I think for the kind of mystery that I think we're talking about here, which now I've started calling traditional mystery because it's different from what the cozy writers are doing these days. But originally, a cozy mystery did have a small setting. It was a group of people who all knew each other or had some connection to each other, which meant they're all kind of in the same place. Now, you could put one of those on a cruise ship, for example. But mostly what I did was at the time that I wrote my first one, I was, and still am, living in Tampa, Florida. And so I used my city for my location. And so the first, I think, 6, 7 books I wrote They were all set there. And readers love that. I mean, readers who live in Tampa, they like to read my books. I have people come up to me and say, "Where is that island again?" And I'm like, "I made it up. It's not there." You know? I mean, there are islands and they're similar, but this one but I like it to be so real that they believe it's there, whether it's there or not, even if they live there. But the setting is a very important part, I think, of a mystery.
Jonathan, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I always like following writers who take the location and make it a character, give it a personality. I mean, I grew up reading the Ed McBain 87th Precinct books, and where he talked about the city as if the city was a person. The Travis McGee novels by John D. MacDonald, Fort Lauderdale and its area, the personality of it was there, and also over the series, that personality gets to evolve. So when I write stories, I like to build the atmosphere of the town into the place, because there are usually characters in a story who aren't as familiar with the town, and so there are moments of discovery that are fun. There are moments where they encounter secrets or something unknown, which amp up tension. But the town itself gets to play a role in creating the sense of mystery, in maintaining the feeling of suspense, and also creating a familiarity so that by the end of the book, the reader feels like they know that place, and that makes them feel included in the process of the storytelling.
Yeah, well, my 1920s, it's in New York. It's very easy. A speakeasy is in every book. I talk about flappers and, blah, blah, blah. My 1930s is Hollywood, California. And that's during the Great Depression. And I've had, and I focus on the Hollywood part, the glamour, and, the glitz and glamour of that. With like subtlety, talking about, it's kind of, the Depression is in the background. And I've had readers say, "I'm so glad you're not focusing on the Depression. That's so depressing. I love, that golden age of Hollywood." It has to be there, but, it's an undercurrent. Everything else is just Hollywood and, that setting. So you have to know what your readers want even in terms of like, if there's, what they want specifically in your book, even if the whole setting of, the world is different, I guess.
Okay, so we all know a good story will always be a good story, and they're timeless in some respects, but I want to talk about what folks here have seen change over the last 10, 20 years in terms of what is selling well now, what's working for you now, in terms of craft specifically. Someone asked me yesterday, said he grew up reading mysteries with longer chapters, and now he sees shorter and shorter chapters in the hit mystery novels that he's reading. I don't think that's a universal truth, but trends, what have you seen change over the last 10 or 20 years, or what have you changed because you see it working better now in terms of craft again?
I had that conversation with Dan Brown at Thriller Fest a bunch of years ago.
Okay.
Because when he structured Da Vinci Code, the novel could easily have rolled out with longer chapters. In fact, in an early draft, it was longer chapters. But he is a big fan of the pulps, and the pulps have these short chapters that have this little narrative hook at the end that kind of makes you want to turn the next page. And back when Da Vinci Code came out, there were a lot of theories about why the book was so popular. It was a good story, a good piece of writing, but it was enormously popular. Well, at the time, thrillers, and it was a mystery thriller, tended to have the long chapters. And I think it was Random House maybe did this survey about it, but they found that the people reading Da Vinci Code were more likely to say positive things because they never, like, if they were reading it at night to go to sleep, they wouldn't fall asleep in the middle of the chapter. Whereas if they're reading a Ken Follett book, as brilliant as that writing is, long chapters, they might fall asleep in it, and they blame the book. They're in bed, comfortable, tired, with a pillow, but they blame the book for falling asleep. The short chapters, you don't have that moment. And it also works for commuters because they can finish the short chapter by the end of their ride. And it became more appealing in its structure. And I've seen that impact a lot of other writers. I know it's certainly impacted the way I frame my books. I like a lot of short chapters with those narrative hooks. And it is the pulp influence.
I write mystery, and then I also write thriller and suspense. My thrillers are much faster paced than the mysteries are. In general, I find that mystery readers are they do like a little bit slower paced book. And so I can, because they like to hang with the characters, they like to hang in the setting, they like to experience the speakeasy, and they want that immersive experience. And so mystery can be, I think, a little slower. But I do think chapters are shorter now, and I also think that if you want your mysteries to be sort of timeless in terms of you want them to be evergreen, you want people, I mean, people are reading John D. MacDonald today, and he's been dead since '86. Yep. So if you want that, then you can't have in a mystery a lot of tech stuff, and because it's obsolete next week, right, before the book comes out. So so that slows the pace as well. I mean, if you have to go interview the suspect rather than sticking him on a video conference call, you know, that just takes more time. So I think mysteries are a little bit slower, but I don't think they're as slow today as they were, you know, back then.
I just want to throw one real quick addendum into this. One of the things I've noticed that is happening with the shorter chapters, and it is mostly thriller. Mysteries tend to have a little more you know, meat on each bone. Is that what this chapter breakup does is it removes the transitional material. You can go from, like this jump cut in a movie, when something is you know, the investigator is done questioning the subject, we don't need to follow them to the parking lot, into the car, and through traffic. We don't need to do all that stuff. We can go to the next thing they're doing. Unless the next thing you're doing is, you know, unless there's some relevance to that transitional material, we cut it out, and that does, just that cut speeds up the book. And even with some longer chapters, they have chapter, like little breaks within the chapter where you can see some of that useless transitional material being edited out or cut out.
Just one quick thing. My mysteries are very fast-paced. My whole idea with it is that the reader gets in bed, they start reading my books, or the book that they're on, and that at 3 a.m. they don't realize it's 3 a.m. and they're still reading. I want everything to end on a cliffhanger that makes them say, just one more 2 chapters, I'll go to bed. One more 2, I'll go to bed. Because I do think we are living in an age right now where everything, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, depending on the way you look at it, is fast, fast, fast. And so you have to like think about that in terms of like, if the reader is living in the world we're living in now, things just keep getting faster and faster.
Yeah, I'd agree with what everyone said about that. My first books that I wrote under A.C. Fuller were more like 80 or 90,000 words, and my new books, which are around 60,000 words, have way more story in them, way more twists, and they're quite a bit, they're 20, 30,000 words shorter. I leave out all the transitional stuff. It's just jump cut, jump cut, jump cut into the middle of the next scene already, and then maybe fill in the back stuff with half a paragraph or something. But I try to leave out all the boring stuff. Okay, let's do a little bit of marketing stuff, and we'll try to make this sort of rapid fire, and then we'll get to some audience questions. Most effective marketing tool that you know is leading to actual sales of books that you are using right now to sell mysteries? I'll just start mine. For me, it's Facebook ads. And of course, people should keep in mind, if you have a huge series in KU, your strategies are probably going to be different than if you're focusing on direct sales. So maybe say where you're trying to send people and what you're using to get them there. Cheryl, do you want to go?
Definitely Facebook ads, and that is something I'm really focusing on. What I'm focusing on really hard right this year is direct sales. That is what is important to me, kind of moving forward, is like, how can I make that better and better and better, and kind of level up the ads and keep scaling up. And so I still will market to everywhere else, but direct sales is where I think it's at.
I'm a bit different. I started with the idea that I was going into a small pond. I actually wrote a post on the Facebook group, the 20 Books to 50K Facebook group about small ponds. I knew that there was less competition, and so I started my covers. I made sure my covers were really good. I make my own covers, and the blurbs were good, and I met readers' expectations. I didn't do any advertising. I still don't do much advertising, and I still make 6 figures. I spend maybe 5% on Amazon ads. That's it. I have a newsletter. So small ponds. I don't know how much that's going to help anyone here, but
That's super useful though. Ads is one great way. You can also do it without ads. How often do you release a new book, roughly?
Well, I did rapid release when I started. So my first year I published 8 books. This year I only published 6, but 3 in one series, 3 in another. So I do rapid release. That helps too.
Right. That's
so.
that's gonna. I mean, so that's again, that's another strategy. But that's good to know. People are doing really well without spending much on ads. But a rapid release is going to be a big part of that, probably. Diane.
I was just talking to a new author about this a couple days ago here at the conference, and I said if I were starting over now, the one thing I would really focus on a lot more than I did back then is I want to keep those readers that come to me. Because early on, we were selling mostly on Amazon back then, and then Apple and Barnes & Noble and Kobo and all the others. And, you know, people would come in, they would read the book, and then they would come back and read another book, but I don't know who they are. So I told this story yesterday, but I had a guy write to me this last week and tell me that he'd been a fan for a long time, and he had read 45 of my books. He's never been on my mailing list. I had no idea he was out there. And that's not what I want. And I'm happy that he's read 45 of my books, but I would like to be able to reach him, to have a conversation with him, to market to him. So to me, the big thing is figure out how, when you find these readers that just suck up your stuff and are so like your stuff so much, how can you keep track of them? How can you stay in touch with them? How can you get them on your mailing list? How can you keep them engaged? How can you let them know when you have a new book? Because I also have a lot of people say to me, I didn't know there were more books in this series. And that happens all the time. And it's not because I'm not out there, you know, getting the word out. It's because I've lost touch with them because they bought something somewhere and I didn't know it. So that's the big thing to me. Get people on your mailing list, stay in contact with them so that when you have something new, you know, they know it, and then they have a chance to either buy it or not.
Yeah, as a traditional author, I don't have to pay for most of my ads. I'm not really involved in that part of it. My publisher buys my Facebook ads, which is yay, you know. For me, engagement, building the audience, and it's all about using social media and focusing on the social part of it. You know, understanding the difference between, you know, what Instagram will give you, what Twitter will give you, what Facebook. Instagram, it's the graphic and the hashtags. Twitter, it's the quick buzz. Facebook is conversations. So I use Facebook for Ask Me Anythings, to set up book discussion groups on Zoom, and just to start conversations. Sometimes the conversations that get you the most punch are not even about your book. Like I'll post, you know, what are you guys reading right now, or what are you writing right now? Talk about your latest, you know, work in progress. Those conversations start. It draws people to it, and it draws some of the fans of the people who are, you know, in the conversation to the conversation as well. It blossoms, and there's a lot of recognition. And we've done some studies. My publisher did some studies based on, you know, sales spikes, whether they're there or not, after I do something on social media. If I do an Ask Me Anything, which I do almost every Thursday, I get a sales spike. You know, they can track the metrics and know that might, you know, being directly there, interacting with people, you know, engages and builds your readership, and that's the biggest part of it for me. Newsletters, of course, big fan of that, but interactive conversation, being social with people, where it's not always sell, it's really community, conversation, that really does it.
Great points. That gets into my next question, which was about social media. Is anyone else using social media effectively, and where are your readers, and how do you engage with them? I know when I got started, I spent way too much time trying to get on all the different social medias and kind of got overwhelmed, and do I need to be on LinkedIn and stuff? And I spent way too much time on that and not enough time focusing on writing a better book. That was my personal mistake. But where are you guys on social media now? I personally focus on Facebook, and again, around community. Mostly it's not sell, mostly it's settings from the book, the dog from the book, pictures of me doing stuff,
Can I
that
just
sort
throw
of thing.
one thing in before everyone else answers?
Yeah, absolutely, and then we'll go down from Dan.
It's important to budget your social media time.
Yes.
5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes out of each writing hour is social media for me. I set a clock for it, and then I don't look at social media again until it's the next time. So budgeting social media is important.
Diane, do you have much social media going?
I do. You know, reading as an activity typically skews older, and reading mysteries definitely skews older. Facebook is where the older readers are, and that's who my readers are. So that's pretty much how I reach out to them and how I talk to them and how I know who some of them are who are not on my mailing list. So Facebook is a big thing for me. I kind of have sort of stopped doing Twitter mostly. Instagram is, that's not great for me, but we do have some stuff on Instagram as well. But I have a Facebook reader group, which I interact with the super fans that are willing to be members there. I have an author page, and then I have my profile. And we post on, I have an assistant who helps me, and we post on all those places at least once a day, and in some of the places we post 3-4 times a day. And we get a lot of interaction. The part of the problem there again is the Facebook algorithm. It doesn't show everything you post to everyone who follows you or who friends you, and so that's a challenge as well. Plus, Facebook being global, people wake up at different times and go to bed at different times. So if I post something at noon, people in England won't necessarily see it, So you have to kind of be aware of things like that, but that's where we post. And we're like Jonathan, we're looking for engagement, but we also want to inform. We want them to know there's a new book, and this is where you can find it. And so we do tell them that pretty frequently.
Colette, how about you? What's your social media like?
Minimal. I don't. I mean, that's another thing about small ponds. I was lucky enough to be invited to join a very popular group within my genre, the History Mystery Chicks. And but otherwise, what I do is on my newsletter, I actively encourage people to email me about anything, literally, and I'll answer any questions. And I've had people, just the randomest things, and I do respond, and that's kind of picked up, and I love that because it's just direct. I don't have to go in search of it. It comes straight to me. But yeah, I have an account on Instagram. I don't have Twitter. I'm glad I don't have to do TikTok. But yeah, Facebook is where my readers are.
Well, when I first started, I had no clue where my readers were, so I thought it must be Twitter, which is X now, whatever. So within 6 months, I worked super hard to build up 40,000 followers, and I got a legit verified check mark, which I won't pay for now. But nobody that's actually in my demographic it did nothing. So I realized that the demographic that we write in, a lot of them are still on Facebook. And so I focus a lot of my time on there, and not only on there, and aside from what everyone's saying about posting consistently, is also I try to have us post something that at least one post a day is going to get maybe 100 likes within the first couple of hours and a whole bunch of shares, because I'm trying to appeal to my audience and to communicate and have conversations with them, but also to communicate beyond that and keep funneling new people in who maybe have never read my books before.
Great, thank you. I want to do some audience questions now. If you have a question, head up to the microphone, which is empty. Would you mind taking that back to the stand? I'm not sure how that happened. While we're waiting for the microphone, quick show of hands, who's going to be at Rave tomorrow signing books?
Launching a book tomorrow.
What's that?
I'll be with the Draft Digital.
You'll be with Draft Digital, and you'll be there signing books and selling books?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, and I'll be there signing books and selling books. So if you don't get to your question, probably you can come up and ask it people and buy a suitcase full of books too. Yes.
Yes, 2 questions. The first one is, you guys were talking about quick chapters. What is the average word count on a quick chapter for you guys?
Who wants to go?
Okay, so my chapters tend to be about 5 pages long. And for a while I was doing 1 scene per chapter, but then I discovered that some of my scenes were too long to be a single chapter. So now I tend to write the whole scene, and then I go back in and I go to 5 pages in on the manuscript, which is a little longer in the book, and I look for a good place to break so that they're going to, as Cheryl said, keep turning the page to the next chapter. So, Willow walks in the front door of a house or of an apartment she's looking in, and she stumbles over a dead body and falls down. Okay, that scene's not over, but now we're into the next chapter.
Right. You can split a long one into 2.
When you say 5 pages, how much is that in words? I measure mine in words.
Oh, I think each page is 250 words, right?
1250
so
to 1500. Jonathan, how long are your chapters? Just average.
They average between 1,000 and 1,500 for the most
Okay.
part, unless the scene needs to be, be uninterrupted.
Cheryl said, yep, mine are exactly the same. They average about 1,250. Some are 2,000, some are 500. They average around 1,250.
And Diane, one
I
quick
don't write a
question.
2,000-word chapter ever anymore.
I've got a
but,
couple of
yeah.
those.
And
Next
I-
question. though.
And
I do have
Diane,
one-sentence
the
chapters,
second
too.
question is, I see that you have on Amazon, you have 3 genres, of which 2 are mysteries, which is what we're talking about here. But then you have one which confuses me a little bit, the financial thriller one. Are your books truly financial thrillers, or is that maybe something that was...
Some of them are.
Some of them
are actually about money and stealing money and,
okay.
hiding money and putting money in the, in the
okay.
Caymans and stuff like that. Some are like that.
Okay.
The motives for murder, there's like 5, and one of them is greed, and I write a lot about that.
Okay, thank you.
Next question.
Hi, I'm just curious about, of the genre that you write in, mystery is a large one, but who are the authors that influenced you to become a mystery writer?
Colette,
I'll just say I grew up watching Murder, She Wrote every week. I Law and Order. If there's a mystery show out there, I've seen it. Whether it's like the Dark Scandies all the way to Murder, She Wrote, I devour it. And so I hit the ground running when I started writing because I knew how a mystery worked, and it was successful. As far as reading, Agatha Christie, of course, because I'm history. But I won't go too long, but yeah, watching is what really helped me, and I think that's what makes my books punchier, is because I followed that lead.
So for me, it was definitely Agatha Christie, hands down. Every single book she ever wrote, I just kind of printed out a list once, and I just started checking off like every single book, until I got through all of them. And also the late great Robert B. Parker. And for me, he didn't have as much a lot of people that are more dialogue driven. What I learned most from him when I was starting out as an author, he was who I was reading, was that I realized I wanted to be more punchy, faster, quick dialogue that moves really fast instead of a whole paragraph of dialogue. It's just one sentence reply, one sentence, sentence, and I love that, and that's what started me figuring out that was eventually going to be what my tone and my writing style was.
And for me, it was John D. MacDonald, Sue Grafton, Sarah Paretsky. I, of course, read everything Christie and things like that as well, but the things that really encouraged me to get going and to start writing now. Lisa Scottolini has written a lot of really fun mystery-type books. And there was somebody else. Then I started to read the cozies, Diane Mott Davidson and those ones as well. So anything, and Murder, She Wrote. And Perry Mason, I'm a lawyer, by training, so Perry Mason.
Yeah, for me, the influences are specific in what they were influencing. With Ed McBain, it was dialogue and pacing. With Elmore Leonard, it was character sketches that were that fast, but you know everything about the character. John D. MacDonald's Travis McGee was all about the introspective, character building that introspection and point of view. And James Lee Burke for his figurative and descriptive language that is almost its own character within the story.
Great question, great answers. Yes.
All right, I have 2 Facebook questions. The first one is from Robina. She says, I am a writer in urban and romance, and I want to bring mystery into my books. I struggle to know how to do that. Do I write from the end? Do I pepper things in? Any advice on getting started would be appreciated.
So how to weave mystery into urban and romance?
Yes, those are her genres.
Okay, not urban romance.
It says urban and romance.
Okay.
I'm just reading it.
So,
verbatim.
but also just weaving mystery into other genres. What do you think
We
about that?
kill people. So I don't know. I imagine she doesn't want to go that far. I think how you end chapters on a cliffhanger, that helps create the suspense. It just depends on what kind of mystery she wants to incorporate into that. I imagine with romance, I used to write romance. Don't kill people in romance. I don't know. I was just being jokey here, but.
Somebody said the definition of a suspense in any book is any unanswered question. So you plant a question and you don't answer it until a long time later. So, there was a knock at the door. End of the chapter. Next chapter, Sally's at lunch. Well, who the heck was at the door? So you keep reading until you figure that out. I mean, that's a very simplistic view, but that it really helps to create suspense.
Yeah, and also it's nice to remember that there's mysteries in almost everything. We just don't necessarily identify them as such. If almost any writer, if they review their own book, will find that they're already putting mystery in there, and a lot of them are already putting romance in there. The question is whether you want to build that up so that and make a decision whether the mystery has to be central to the story, or whether it's something that's maybe the framework for the bonding between two characters, that they're sorting it out, and that's where they meet and fall in love and so on. But there's mystery and romance and darn near everything. People don't give themselves credit for already doing some of it.
And this is just a personal thing. My point of view is if there's not a murder, it's not a mystery. Okay? I mean, sometimes whatever my husband is thinking is a mystery to me, but that's not what we're talking about here, right?
Cheryl?
Well,
I'll mention that.
and I would say, let's say that that what they're wanting to write is like something that doesn't have a murder. In my paranormal suspense, which still do have murder, I really focus on, it's not like murder, because it's just different. And so what I focus on with those is just making the reader nervous, turning the heat up. Let's say there's no dead body, but still turning the heat up and making them worried about something that I haven't explained that still needs to happen. And I will draw that out in a book like that, whereas I'm more faster with murders in a traditional murder mystery.
Yeah, what my wife was saying from the back was I taught a 2-part class yesterday. You can look it up. It's called The Plot Thickens. They probably have videos. It'll be on YouTube, which is specifically about using mystery techniques, both the overall structure and then within a scene in non-mystery genres. There was another online question, though.
Yes, the second online question was, for those of you who use newsletters, if so, how often, and what are some of your good content ideas?
My newsletters are pretty structured, same. It's taken me probably 10 years to figure out what is the best thing that my readers specifically want. I always start out talking about somewhere I've been, something I'm doing, what I'm doing, without getting too personal, and posting a photo about something that I've done that makes them feel like they're a part of my world. I don't talk about my books until down later in the newsletter, and then at the bottom, which is become their favorite part, after I talk about kind of like, this is my new book coming out, this is on pre-order, I will always play a game. And for me, I've tried all kinds of different things, Q&A that's author related, like which author did this or that or the other, but they love hidden clue games, like games where you're like, what 5 words are in this like cartoonish looking picture? And then they just reply, and my assistant gathers all those. They write all the time and tell me that they love that. And we still try to add a mystery element, but I just want to I want to make them open it up and read it to the bottom consistently. And I send out 2 a month, and it's always the same exact day, twice a month, consistently without missing most of the time.
Anyone else have anything unique to say about newsletters?
Just really quickly, I'm going to steal from you, but I right now only do when I have a book coming out, but I do include, I go on a lot, one of the nice things about New York is that I go on a lot of walking tours, you know, the Gangsters and Ghosts of New York, the historical tours, love it, love it, love it. Brooklyn has a whole section, I open a book and take a picture. They love the historical facts that I include in my, newsletter, because I write historical mystery. So I include that, and then I do talk, a little bit about myself. I start with the book. I say, hey, this book is coming out. Scroll down if you want to learn more about, historical facts or, me. So.
One thing I started doing a few years ago that is working really well for me now is I list every single book I have, and I have a hot link that will take them to a universal, I use Books to Read, a universal link where they can acquire the book if they want to. They can borrow it, they can buy it, whatever. Every book I have 60 books. So I have, it took me a while to figure out how to organize that. Actually, my newsletter was featured in a blog recently. You can see it there if you're interested. And now, since like Cheryl, I'm very focused on direct sales these days, I have that right at the top of the list where they can find all my stuff, so I do that. I also do, I send out my newsletter every week, and I divide my list into people who are responsive and people who are non-responsive. So I send the responsive list on Friday and the non-responsives on Saturday. And it makes a difference in terms of the newsletter service. It deals with my sender reputation and all that. And I'm always surprised that people on the non-responsive list actually click and open when they have a chance, because what will happen is otherwise they get caught in spam filters if they haven't opened for a while or whatever. So that's what I do. But I also have a structure, sort of like Cheryl's structure. It's a little bit different, but that helps. And then I want them to open, click, respond. So I work on the headline, I give them the opportunity to buy a book, and then I have giveaways and posts and polls and things to encourage them to reply to me, because that tells the sending service that they're still out there and they're still alive and they're engaged, and then they're more likely to get what I send them.
Yeah, my newsletters are very much like my Instagram. There's a graphic, there's a short paragraph, there's a link, and that's it. I mean, there's also a link to my website on the page, but all of my friends are writers, and a lot of them write long, elaborate newsletters, which I don't read because I don't have the time. And so I stopped doing long, elaborate newsletters, which I used to do, which I loved doing. And as my audience grew, I found that I get a higher click rate if I just have a graphic, a short paragraph, and a link. I went from maybe like a 35% click rate to a 92% click rate when I shifted my format and just collapsed it down to an impulse, basically an impulse buy or an impulse click.
That's interesting. Okay, so I've got one final question. A lot of the folks here already have multiple books out, between 1 and 10 books. A lot of us in the next, say, year are going to wrap up a series, and we're going to sit down and say, we want to write a hit series, a hit mystery series. Maybe that's historical, maybe it's cozy, although that's going on next door. Maybe it's a traditional mystery series. What's the one thing, if you were to sit down and I said you have to sit down right now, you've got 3 hours to brainstorm, what's the first thing you would focus on about thinking about writing, a big successful series in the mystery genre? Would you start with a setting, a memorable character, a particular department of the police or FBI? How would you think about it? We've got about 45 seconds per person. Colette, you want to start? You had your hand. You look.
Is this brand new or just in
Yeah, no, I'm
addition to
talking
what
about a brand new series, because we're all going to wrap up a series at some point, and then we're going to have another idea, and we want it to be even more successful than our last series. So how would you think about starting a new series?
I would tie it to a series I already have. All my series are going to be tied together. One is, made an appearance in one. One's going to be a granddaughter. One is the best friend. I tie them all together. In my series, I'm going to go to 100 books if I can. That's the beauty of mystery. You can keep going forever. So that's what I would do.
I would start with the character. And that's actually something I'm kind of doing right now. I'm brainstorming a new witch series because I'm seeing that there's really, I've kind of been focusing on what subgenres are readers really just trying to find more books to read in, and there's not enough. Because there's plenty in mainstream mystery, there's always going to be plenty of that. But what can I write that maybe I wouldn't have to market as much, because there's just not as many people in it, and I do see that as an area, the paranormal suspense.
Whenever I start a new series, which isn't that often, but I do have quite a few series, so I've done it a few times, I always start with character, and I try to write a character that I think readers are going to want to read about. I do not write unlikable characters. I want people to fall in love with my main character, and I want them to want more and more and more books about that person. And so even the series that I have sort of wrapped up, like you say, I get reader emails saying, is there going to be another book? I would like to have another book, and I'm like, yeah, as soon as I find a clone. But that's what I want to do. So I start with the character every time.
John?
I actually just pitched a new series to my agent the other day, so I'll use that as an example. I like drawing on real life as much as possible, so I just pitched a series about a kid who wants to grow up to be a bodyguard. I used to be a bodyguard. And his parents are active bodyguards, so I can give them some of my experiences from when I was in the trade and, show it from a kid's point of view of, the world-changing worldview. So I think that's going to wind up being one of my next big YA series. I think that has that feel to it.
That's interesting. I noticed almost no one said you would start with, a particular murder or a particular crime. I think most of us probably know there are unlimited interesting crimes out there, unlimited things going on from the news we can pull from. And so, yeah, I would be the same. I would never start with, I'm really interested in this particular kind of serial killer. If I was going to launch a series, I would do that for a book. For a series, I would immediately sit down and think about setting and character at the same time. That's what I want, a fascinating setting, and I want an interesting character who probably, for what I like to do, isn't from that setting originally, because it allows me to explore the setting in more interesting ways if they weren't born and raised there. That's just how I like to do it. But we've got 9 seconds left now. Thank you to all the panelists. That was phenomenal. Privileged to get to talk to you all. Thank you all for coming.